Hello and welcome to Global Review. As you know, this is our weekly program bringing to you key development issues that we find in the world in last 1 week. We also bring to you analysis which is full with insights and brings to you details of each of those developments that we capture. But let's first have a look at the headlines. Germany's Merkel survives on asylum issues, develops a pan-European approach. China further opens up for foreign investment. Amazon acquires PillPack, now to enter in pharmacy market. The venue for Putin-Trump summit announced. Summit would be in Helsinki on July 16th. Trump's U-turn on Chinese investment drops the restrictions which were proposed earlier. France and Nigeria to improve diplomatic relations. China, India indulge in defense diplomacy. Iranian oil sanctions to be softened further. As you would agree, this week again was extremely hectic across the globe. Several issues came up, several developments happened, more of U-turns by US administration, more aggression by Europe, and of course some constructive efforts. Let's have a look at the across the globe. And across the globe, that's what we are going to capture today for you in terms of how constructive news from Asia is giving us some solace in all the negative developments in trade, investment, and related diplomatic relations. Let's have a look at this report.
Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership (RCEP) is a proposed free trade agreement between the 10 member states of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations (ASEAN), covering countries Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, and the 6 states with which ASEAN has existing free trade agreements: Australia, China, India, Japan, South Korea, and New Zealand. RCEP negotiations were formally launched in November 2012 at the ASEAN Summit in Cambodia. The FTA is expected to be signed in November 2018 during the ASEAN Summit in Singapore. RCEP is viewed by many as an alternative to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a proposed trade agreement which includes several Asian and American nations but excludes China and India. The ministers from the 16 RCEP participating countries (RPCs) attended the 5th RCEP Intercessional Ministerial meeting held on 1st July 2018 in Tokyo, Japan. This meeting has given a signal of quickening of the process. The ministers discussed the development since the 4th RCEP Intercessional Ministerial meeting on 3rd March 2018 in Singapore. The ministers recognized the importance of swiftly and successfully concluding the RCEP negotiations, consistent with the guiding principles and objectives for negotiating the RCEP, particularly in view of the current global trade environment, which faces serious risks from unilateral trade actions and reactions, as well as their debilitating implications on the multilateral trading system. To this end, the ministers tasked negotiators to focus efforts towards achieving a package of year-end outcomes. On market access, the ministers appreciated efforts undertaken by all RPCs to facilitate movements towards the final offers, including through the intensification of request and offer negotiations to address specific interests and concerns, and instructed negotiators to improve market access offers in order to meet leaders' expectations of positive and constructive responses to requests.
So RCEP has emerged as an important trade grouping. It has several promises, and as our research report showed, after collapse of TPP and the current war that we are seeing in tariffs, and of course now getting into currency wars, is extremely important at this point. To discuss these issues, today we are joined in the studio by Professor Upendra Das, one of our prominent trade commentator, research analyst and part of the negotiating team. We are also joined here by Ambassador Talmiz Ahmed, who was our envoy in several of the West Asian countries. We would talk to him on several issues that are on our agenda today. But let's first talk to Professor Upendra Das on issues related to RCEP. What are the key issues that Tokyo meeting discussed, and how this is going to help in terms of new constructive proposition from Japan or from ASEAN countries?
Well, thank you, Professor Sachin Chaturvedi. This is a very positive news from Asia, and considering that there is global trade and economic turmoil that everyone is grappling with and also witnessing, this is something which is very positive, because for the benefit of viewers, RCEP, which is a bloc of ASEAN 10 plus 6 countries, of which India is a very prominent member, constitutes almost half of global population.
That's right.
And it's almost 1/3 of global GDP. And its share in global trade is around 25%, 1/4. So it's a very major economic bloc. And if we go by the trends of shifting center of economic gravity to Asia, RCEP and its culmination as it is proposed in November is going to be really something very important. And this is one of the messages which actually came out of the Tokyo meeting.
Right. But how you see this disruption which is emerging, the imposition of tariffs on China? As you see in Southeast Asia, they have been interconnected value chains. The disruption would be across value chains. It would not remain confined to China alone. So how the interdependence of countries within key sectors where China emerged as an important exporter, how you see that getting disrupted with US tariff imposition and efforts to bring forward TPP or an alternative to TPP in the region?
It's a very good question, but I see it in two ways. One is, of course, because China is a major exporter to US, and if anything blocks China's exports to US, anything which is backwardly linked to Chinese economy in terms of exporting them in terms of parts and components will adversely get affected. So one hypothesis of mine is that because of this global interdependence, including US on China, this trade war may not last
very long.
Only question is how long it will take to end, because global interdependence exacerbated by global value chains and regional value chains. Today, no country can sustain its economic trajectory just on its own. And this global interdependence, I think, is going to compel countries who are reacting, acting, retaliating, and put a stop to this war, as if war and conflicts in non-economic domains were not enough that we are having these.
But tell me something in terms of how the Indian interests are on the table. As we have seen, this is not a new negotiation we are witnessing at this point. This round was started in 2012, 16 different sectors have been covered. It has evolved over the years. India's interest in services, and you have worked in that area. In what way you see this interplay coming in full display when we are going to close it by end of 2018, as the joint declaration says?
Yes. As far as India is concerned, India of course has relatively higher tariffs, and therefore if we open up, we will be ending up giving market access to other countries. And therefore we need to balance our opening up to other countries which will be beneficial to them by cross-sectoral opening by them. Now they have other partners of RCEP have been confused between temporary movement of natural persons with permanent migration. Many times justifiably so, but it seems that now there is some convergence which is happening, and we have been able to convince other countries that look, we are all for RCEP, and as the term RCEP contains the word comprehensive, it cannot be just a trade in goods agreement. If it is going to be comprehensive, it has to include trade in services, investment and other areas of cooperation.
So, are you hopeful of this conclusion by end of the year?
I
Do
am
you
very
see any-
hopeful
I
because
see.
India has given an impression that on trade in goods, we are willing to walk an extra mile, but at the same time, other countries must also walk that extra mile in the realm of trade in services and investment. We are also devising a strategy on e-commerce, which has been a bone of contention between Australia and Japan on one hand, and in India, preparedness was not
In
that
fact, if
much.
we see the joint declaration, it has identified 3 groups, and one of them covers e-commerce. Incidentally, India took a very different position at the WTO negotiations on e-commerce. So how you see these contradictory trends getting reconciled when we have to close these negotiations?
No, again, this is a very good and important question. India took a stand in WTO in terms of not having anything, very substantive movement ahead in e-commerce. We can discuss it, that's a different matter, on the pretext that this is a subject matter which is evolving, and at this juncture, we are not prepared to make a commitment, a binding commitment at the WTO level. At the same time, Government of India, led by the Commerce and Industry Minister, has formed a think tank at the government level and at the interministerial expertise level. We are trying to also see that while this sector evolves, what is it that we can also do in terms
domestic
of
preparedness.
Exactly,
Yeah,
and
that's
that is
very
going to be a positive input to RCEP, and I think these may not remain contradictory.
In any case, no positions are fixed positions. Your national interests keep on evolving as the size of the economy and our interests are evolving. So that I think is extremely important. Last question on this important dimension of RCEP negotiation is vis-a-vis TPP. Where do you see these two processes? Now that the US has completely withdrawn, the Asian countries have already come up with their own version of TPP, but there is greater commitment by Tokyo to have RCEP concluded by the end of the year. How you see these two trends?
If at all, I would see RCEP's conclusion with China, Japan, India, ASEAN leadership contributing to that as a positive influence on the TPP process. I have an hypothesis whereby I would feel that US would at some stage realize the benefit of intercontinental trade agreement, which they should have been a part of. In fact, I would not be surprised because if you recall and you know about it, that in East Asia Summit process, after ASEAN plus 6 actually started meeting on a regular basis at the summit level, US and Russia also became a part. So, which became ASEAN plus 6 plus 2. So, I would like to envision a world where whether TPP evolves or not, because many of the TPP members are in RCEP, I would like to see RCEP as ASEAN plus 6 plus 2.
On that positive note, we would have to stop for a break. Don't go away. We have a lot more to discuss, many interesting points. Welcome back. In this section, as you know, we bring to you a discussion on issues that are not there in news columns. We call this Beyond the News. In today's Beyond the News section, we are planning to cover issues that are confronting the West Asian countries. How the Arab world is grappling with n number of new changes that have happened. We all heard about Arab Spring. We have seen a lot of literature on that. But in terms of key developments, now I think the time has come for Arab world to bring in those changes. Let's have a look at this report.
Nation-states form alliances for combined security apparatus, but insecurity complex has taken over the Gulf states in recent times. Alliances are shifting. Iran is being aggressive with its support to Houthis. Saudis are reforming socially. US has all but abandoned pivot to Asia and has scrapped the nuclear deal with Iran. Gulf states are being friendly towards Israel and ostracization with Qatar. Russian support to Assad regime in Syria and conflict in Yemen has further complicated the security situation of the region. Qatar, the smallest and richest of Gulf Cooperation Council, is charged with closeness to mullahs of Iran, support to Muslim Brotherhood, interferences with other countries by giving voice to the separatists through the state-funded Al Jazeera news network. All these charges are vehemently refuted by Qatar, which in turn is experiencing an infra and real estate boom on account of 2022 FIFA Football World Cup. Announcement of the Saudi Emirati Coordination Council has posed challenges for GCC, which is also struggling with diversifying its economies. Oil accounts for about 30% of GDP and 80% of government revenues in Gulf states on average. Other GCC members look to Dubai for answers. Dubai has benefited from the unique federal structure of the UAE, in which each of the 7 emirates can experiment with economic and governance models. The UAE is a bird that flies with 2 wings, Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Dubai has focused on growth through private enterprise, while Abu Dhabi provides much of the country's oil wealth and geopolitical heft. Thanks to Dubai, the UAE is the Gulf's most diversified economy.
These changes in the Arab world we are going to discuss with Ambassador Talmiz Ahmad, one of the most analytical voice in India on issues that are confronting West Asia. Sir, you have served as our ambassador in Saudi Arabia, in Oman, in UAE. You have also come out with a book in 2013 called Islamic Challenge in West Asia, Doctrinal and Political Competitions. How you view the contemporary West Asia? What are the key challenges that we see in Arab world particularly, and how the new changes are going to have impact on rest of the world? But within that broad theme, let me first pose you this question on our experience with Islam, the way it has emerged in Arab world, and how the new orientation is going to change Arabs' engagement with the rest of the Islamic countries all over the world.
As far as I can see, West Asia is experiencing extraordinary turbulence and turmoil. There is a very serious conflictual scenario emanating from the confrontation between Saudi Arabia and Iran. There are 2 proxy wars taking place in Syria and Yemen, in which 500,000 people have been killed. The principal source of divide between them is strategic. And unfortunately, in order to mobilize support for their own position, Saudi Arabia has shaped it in sectarian terms. But that is not the source. The source is strategic vulnerability in the face of expanding Iranian influence across West Asia. Now, you have raised the issue of Islam. Islam is again a mobilizing tool. It is not the source. You should recall here that the origin or the roots of the present extremism lies in Afghanistan, which was sponsored. It was a state-sponsored jihad which was put together by Saudi Arabia, Pakistan and the United States. And from there many other forces have emerged, including Al-Qaeda. You again have to see that the rise of the Islamic State in Iraq and then it spread into Syria is a result of American intervention in Iraq. And there had been no presence of jihad at that time. At that time, the Americans had destroyed state institutions. They had destroyed the sources that had kept the nation together. They had humiliated the leadership, and they had deliberately sought to empower the Shia community. So the jihad, which was led by Zarqawi and then it metamorphosed into the Islamic State for Iraq and Syria of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, is a result of that. So whatever you see, it is not the doctrinal aspect that is important, it's the political aspect.
That's right. And how the regional institutional architecture is changing, Ambassador, as you see issues that are coming in, like GCC was one of the important ones, but now with the emergence of Saudi Emirati Coordination Council, that is likely to get some traction, and more efforts are on in terms of pushing that in. How the regional institutional architecture is changing when these conflicts and efforts to isolate one or the other country in the region is getting more and more prominence now?
The main point to be noted is that in this region of West Asia, North Africa, institutions have never been solid. It is a very personality based scenario, and it is led by royal family leaders. Why you had a sense of stability is because royal families tended to be very low key, very moderate, and the diplomacy used to be behind the scenes. Now you have a new generation of leaders who are responding to the new challenges, and these are the demand for reform. The last thing this region wants is to see reform, because that would then undermine their own authority and their own prerogative. So this is the key. The key is the resistance to change and the permission to be given to the population to participate in the political decision making. That is being resisted. And because it is being resisted by the royal families, you find a whole series of options that they are now exercising in terms of appeasing their population with huge dollops of cash. You are seeing certain promises being made for reform, etc., but never a concession as far as the political order is concerned.
And Mr. Ahmed, this region is also very crucial for us for our energy security. For India, the options are becoming all the more limited as Iran is facing sanctions, and the efforts are on to engage not only United States but also Russia and China. How this scenario is unfolding now?
As far as India is concerned, we are facing very serious challenges to our interests, indeed our long-term interests. We of course are dependent on this region's stability as far as our energy security is concerned. We get 80% of our petroleum from here, and it's likely to become 90% in the near future. We get 50 to 60% of our gas. This is also a very major economic partner. It is our number one or very prominent trade partner. It is also a very important source for investment. Also, do not forget, we have 8 million people, 80 lakh people living there, and their security is of crucial importance to us. Right. And finally, we have logistical connectivity projects as far as Iran is concerned. And through the development of Chabahar, which has great strategic significance, we would be able to go to Afghanistan, Central Asia and Russia. So all of these crucial interests of India now demand that there should be stability. And indeed, I would argue to you, and I have been doing this for some years, that India can no longer have the luxury of confining itself to New Delhi or to South Asia. India has to be actively engaged in the promotion of security and stability in this region.
On that note, we would get into book of the week. And today we have picked up extremely interesting book, Trade, Technology and Growth. This triangle of trade, technology and growth has assumed great importance for several developing countries. And the analysis is actually focusing on interest, strategies and course of action that is being followed by developing countries. This book by Professor Upendra brings out the essence of how the countries have evolved their own trajectories, both in technology, but also at what intersection it has with economic growth and of course their overall macro policies. So Pin, in 1 minute, tell us about your book.
First of all, again, thank you for this. But this is a very interesting book because you yourself have worked on all these dimensions of technology, trade and economic growth in developing countries and developed countries. The book tries to, blend 3 aspects of economic growth, trade and technology. Very often than not, these are studied in silos. Those who study the entire innovation literature or the international trade literature or the growth theories you see. In this book, we have tried to blend the 3 streams of economic growth theories, the innovation system, the technology capability.
Have
and
you also dealt with employment in this? Which
yes.
Viewers would have a lot of interest in terms of how.
Yes, in fact, there is one full chapter devoted on this, whereby I try to analyze the tension between technology and employment. Very often than not, because of technological upgradation, what happens is that you produce the same level of output with fewer, people required for the job, and therefore technology becomes labor displacing. So this book looks at diametrically opposing, objectives. how to balance those, because technological modernization is also important and employment generation is also important. So, this book actually sheds some light how to go about balancing these two opposing objects.
Excellent. On this note, we would have to close this, and we look forward for your comments, ideas, and we come back to you with many more research that we do at our end in terms of making this program richer and insightful. Thank you.